So it's a little bit chaos magic-y, isn't it, sounding? Calling on your heroes. But it could be chaos magic if you decided to go down that route, if that's your thing, by choosing a fictional character that has touched you in some way, or just by running with the principles in your own, in your own way. But much as I do love chaos magic, I'm more of a traditionalist, so I think that's probably what's going to come across here. So, do you have a hero or heroine? I don't know whether we use that word now. Is there a character from the past who intrigues you or inspires you? Is there someone that you'd like to commune with or contact in some way? I mean, you probably have several characters that come to mind. And I suppose the one I'm going to focus on, just for the purposes of, doing this really, is Boudica. Now, we're not going to go into a history lesson, but she's a British warrior queen from the times of, the Roman invasions in the 1st century. And I've just picked someone out. I mean, she is very, very dear to me as a character, but I have just picked her out as, just for example purposes, really. So I've got that, there we go, look, I've got a couple of books here that, I've been using. So can you see, let's put that, I don't know if that's backwards for you, but Boudica is sometimes spelt with a single C, and of course the Roman name was Boadicea. We were always taught it was Boadicea. It's only in recent times, I think, that we've come to know her by her presumably Celtic name of Boudica. Anyway, in my childhood, I was very taken with her story, and she really has become a hero or heroine for me, because she represents courage and bravery and motherly love and devotion, leadership, righteousness, determination, all those kinds of things, and I suppose a lot more. And that is the kind of spiritual force that she represents. And I'll come back to that in a moment, because I think that's important. So over the years, I have obviously read about her. I have read about her campaigns, but more importantly, I've imagined her. Imagined, what does she look like? What did she look like? What was her voice like? What was she like to be around? And all those sorts of things. And I only tell you this because I think this is the basis for working with your heroes, whoever they may be. You immerse yourself in the backstory, and you develop as strong a picture of them as you possibly can. If they've written anything, if you're lucky enough to have something left like that, obviously read their words. But it is the key, I think, to I say contact loosely, but I think that is the key to developing a relationship, is that strong imagination as you picture them. So with all of the knowledge that I had, and it is fairly scant, I mean this was I suppose a long time ago, and the records are mostly Roman, of course. We don't even have a grave site for Boudica, but anyway, that's beside the point. With everything that I know, I was able to build up this picture, and I wrote about her in my own words, to honour her life, to give thanks for her sacrifices, and to just acknowledge the force that this woman was in the world. And these words that I have written will be the basis for my evocation of her. So, getting away a little bit from the actual personage, I'm probably not interested in at all, because of her timeline, I was able to use a little bit of Celtic magic, because that was her time. That's, I did wonder, who did she worship? I expect she had druidic advisors, but this was her time, and in here there's sort of lots of hints and tips that I could use. It's all part of building up that whole idea, really, and to go forward using it. I mean, this is so beautiful in itself. It's a very 1970s, I think, design, but if that's not Boudica, probably a much more feminized version, but yeah, just beautiful, isn't it? So really, what I would really appreciate Boudica as a spiritual ally. And I think the first thing to do, apart from reading up, just as we did with the saints, reading their backstory, becoming familiar is the first step. And then you want to build a relationship, and that's so important, I suppose, just like any other friendship, I suppose. You don't expect it to develop, all of a sudden. It takes time to build this up. So I would be thinking along the lines of a small altar with a picture, with some relevant sort of bits and bobs, a candle, and perhaps doing a weekly small devotional. There's a difference, I think, isn't there, between this sort of thing and deity. We're certainly not worshipping these people because they were human beings. They're not divine in the sense of a deity. So we are honouring them and venerating them more than we wouldn't really call it worship. So I think that is a very respectful and good way to begin any kind of practice, developing a relationship with your hero. And what does that hero represent to you? One of the questions, I suppose the obvious question, is are you communing with the actual spirit of that person? And I have no idea. I definitely don't know the answer to that one. But I think it's important to follow your own beliefs around this sort of thing. So you may think, you may think this is the spirit of the person. You may think, oh well, this is an archetype, that an archetypal energy that represents X, Y, and Z to me, that could be perfectly the case as well. And you can work just as fruitfully, you know, in that case. Or perhaps it might be that you're thinking, well, this is a spiritual force, that this person embodies that spiritual force, and that's what I'm working with. But I think it's important that you're comfortable in what you believe, and you're not trying to pigeonhole yourself into the belief that, oh, I'm working with a spirit, when in actual fact you don't really believe in that, you know. I think that's going to be so counterproductive. You're going to have so many obstacles to overcome, you know, in the very first place. So go with what feels right to you and just run with that. So on that subject, a reputable source for this kind of magic, I suppose, among many reputable sources, I must add, is Gareth Knight. And in his introduction to ritual magic, he speaks of this. And he says, we're not calling upon the personalities of the departed celebrities. Now, this is where he's coming from on the subject. You might have a different idea. So we're not calling upon the personalities of the departed celebrities, simply the ambience of the charisma. That's a bit wordy, isn't it? That has become attached to their roles. But he does say, I mean, this is a very sort of, I suppose, a very psychological model of things, isn't it? But he does go on to say a little bit later, even so, overshadowing, in inverted commas there, can occur when the actual person seems to arrive and inhabit the celebrant. So that's something to look out for, not to be too surprised about if that does happen to happen. So really he's meaning that overall this is a spiritual force that we wish to connect with, and it can be contacted by way of the mythology around that person, or if it's a historical character, obviously the history and stories. So that when we imagine that person strongly, everything they represent, so that we can connect with the relevant spiritual force, and therefore imagination is key. And in that sense, he feels that our heroes can be conjured very easily in that way. I was looking, the book I wanted to show was, well, to really recommend in this sort of vein was not actually this one. This was the only one I could find. I have read this, I really enjoyed it, but it's not the one that I wanted to recommend. And the one that I wanted to recommend was Jason Miller, Consorting with Spirits. I just can't find it. It even makes me wonder if I actually do have it. Anyway, that was the one. This one was great. Really thoroughly enjoyed reading it. So we've spoken about a couple of methods, how to start, the altar, maybe weekly devotionals, offerings, all of that. On my channel about 2 or 3 years ago now, I have a video called How to Meet your ancestors, or how to meet an ancestor, I think it is. Now this is a great way to, it's a really good method. And it doesn't have to be an ancestor necessarily. You can adapt it for your own use. And it is from the work of R.J. Stewart, a Scottish occultist. I think that's where that comes from. But that's a really good one to use. Evocation, of course, you could, if you're a little bit more experienced or just happy in your, magical doings, you can plan a whole ritual to honour and possibly evoke this hero. Otherwise, a more gentle way of doing things is via guided meditation. The meeting your ancestor one is a kind of guided meditation. But you can do your own and just, get relaxed and then let your imagination take you to a place where that person perhaps was familiar, or to a relevant place in your imagination, and ask them to appear. Just wait. I've had quite a lot of success with this in the past. Obviously, we may be channeling, we may be meeting an actual spirit, we may not be, and sometimes the information that we come across is heavily filtered through our own consciousness, our own beliefs, our own cultural, all of that makes us us. But it's a very interesting exercise anyway, and it's well worth doing. I mean, if you're good at pendulum work or automatic writing or scrying of some description, you could use all those sorts of things. I hope that this might have inspired you to begin a relationship with your own heroes. They're very important in our lives, and they're very important. But as you work with your hero, however you choose to do it, you don't have to do any of the things I've mentioned here. Look out for little synchronicities as you begin to work with your hero. They do happen, and they're very exciting when they do happen. And I think, personally, they are signs that your work and your presence is felt. Blessings to you all.